Well, good morning, everyone. You're a friendly group. Wow. If I just let you go, you just keep talking. So let's go ahead and make our way to our seat and then stand up, everybody. You just got comfortable. We're going to make a little bit different declaration today. I actually have the privilege of speaking on the 23rd Psalm. For those that don't know, we are doing a summer in the Psalms. So we're going to be in Psalms the whole summer, and I'm excited about it. I am a worship guy, so I'm really pumped about that. But I want you to turn your attention to the screen, and we are going to make this declaration today of Psalm 23. How many just love Psalm 23? 23rd Psalm is just so beautiful. So let's go ahead and put that up, and let's all say it together on the count of 3. You ready? 1, 2, just kidding, 3. Here we go. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely, and I will in the house of the Lord. All right. Awesome. You may be seated this morning. And just a few quick announcements. I wanted to let you know that for if you've been around for a while here at the Road, you know that we have a worship academy that is actually set to start on August 29th. And registration is officially open for that. And so you can go on the website. I think it's up on the app. And if you're interested in joining our worship academy, we're really excited. This will be now our 2nd year. And you don't have to have a prerequisite. You can join at any time. We just do the teaching. Like if you join in the fall, then you finish in the spring. Or if you join in the spring, then you'll finish in the fall. So it's a year-long course. So secondly, I wanted to mention I brought a few of my books. And unfortunately, we sold out of this one. This is actually the last one I have left, but this was a book that is a part of a series. It's called the Secret Heart series. You don't have to read them in order, but this book is it's taken me about 20 years to write. It's my life story, a lot of the things that God has taught me in ministry through the years. It's called Secret Heart of God, and I'm hoping to get some more of those. But then also, I did not know until Steve announced it, and we were talking about it in staff, that we were going to spend the summer in the Psalms. And I wrote this a few years back. This is on the life of David. It is called Secret Heart of a Worshiper, From Pasture to Palace. This is the early part of David's life when he was rejected, running from Saul, fighting Goliath, fighting battles. It's a 9-week devotional and at the end of every week, we talk about one of the Psalms, and in particular the Psalm that we talk about during the week, and the Psalm that we know exactly what was happening in David's life when he wrote that Psalm. There are a number of those. So that's From Pasture to Palace. It's 9 weeks, 5 days of reading, reflections on the week, and then a focus on Psalm. And then at the beginning of the year, right before conference, the Lord prompted me to go ahead and finish on the life of David. This is Secret Heart of a King. And it's also a 9-week devotional. And it focuses on when he became king to his death. And I just released this at conference. And actually I end and make an argument for why I believe that Psalm 23 was written later in David's life as opposed to him being in the shepherd field. So there's that. I've also got some fiction books out there. There's a series that focuses on the millennium. And then this was an Amazon bestseller when I released it. And it's been my biggest seller. It's called Snow Sometimes Falls. So we got some music. So I thought since I was speaking that I'd bring my products and Hopefully you can pick those up. I'm selling everything for $10 or 3 for $25. So it's a good deal. You can get some good reading material this summer, and especially on Psalms. So, all right. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to the 23rd Psalm. I know we just quoted it. But I'm really super pumped to be able to share on this psalm. In our worship academy, I actually speak quite a bit on the Psalms, and I have a teaching that I do that's way too long for us to get into this morning, but the Lord just kind of dropped some things in my heart about Psalm 23 that I want to share with you this morning. First off, this is David's masterpiece, I believe. I know that there are a lot of Psalms. In fact, the Lord has prompted me to try to memorize Psalms, and I'm about 100 in, and not the whole Psalm, but especially 119. I'm not going to be memorizing that one. But I just felt like as a songwriter that he wanted me to really dive into the Psalms, and I've been memorizing for about 5 years now. And this is one that I memorized, and it really means a great deal to me. And having dug into the Psalms so much, I just have to say this psalm is second to none. This really is David's masterpiece, I believe. I love David. You know he was a man after God's own heart, right? Do you know that he was the only man in Scripture that was called that? He had a special place in the heart of God. He was a man after God's own heart. And the thing I love about David is I love the fact that you don't have to question what he's thinking. Have you noticed that in the book of Psalms? I mean, he literally involved whatever he was going through in life in his worship. Imagine if we did that. Instead of playing games in church, imagine if we came in and we're like, God, you're my provider. You're the gas in my car that's almost $5. And I love you for it. But that's exactly what David did. David is looking at a mountain, and he was a warrior, and he was a strategist, and he looks at the mountain and he said, man, if I'm on that mountain, I have the upper hand. Then all of a sudden he starts worshiping. He's like, I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of that mountain, that shields me. And there's another one where he said this. He said, the wicked are like a lion in their pursuit of the godly. Well, guess what David fought at one point? He had fought a lion. He fought a bear. And then he's like, thank you, Lord, for sparing me from the lion. Thank you that you are my shield and my protector. He was always involving his everyday world in his everyday worship. Then one day, he's playing his harp, and he's thinking back to when he was a shepherd and all the sheep and how dumb they were and how they always got into problems. And then all of a sudden, he's like, well, I'm pretty dumb too. And I get myself into problems. In fact, I'm just like one of those dumb sheep. And he said, fling. He's like, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I don't know what the melody was, but I can guess. He basically said, Lord, why don't you be my shepherd? In fact, all of us can pray that. Lord, why don't you be my guide? Why don't you help me be like a shepherd to me in this life? So here's the question. How many of you would say the Lord is your shepherd? He's your guide. So what does that make you? Well, let's see a picture of what we are. That is the epitome of intellect right there, wouldn't you say? Let's look at a little closer picture. Wow. You guys, that's us. That's us. Let's look at another one. Just always getting into trouble, right? In fact, I found this video, maybe you've seen it, but it is the epitome, I think, of sheep behavior.
Давай, ты сможешь. Ты же у нас любишь животных. Абуш, отойди.
Нет, сам.
Он боится и так нас. Отойди.
Я пойдем.
Абуш, отойди.
Нет.
Потяни сейчас. Сам. Вверх потяни. Ой, умничка, Риад, умничка. Ногу не сломай только ему. Умничка, умничка. За обе ноги. Молодец, Риад. Умничка. Умничка. Все, операция удалась.
You guys, that's us. When are we going to learn? When are we going to learn? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Everybody just say that and point to yourself. The Lord is my shepherd. Isn't it amazing how the Lord is so wonderful that he can interact with each of us personally? He's not a distant God. He's not far off from a distance. No, he's right here. He's close. The Lord is my shepherd. And because he's my shepherd, what promise do we have? I shall not want. I shall not want. Here's the thing about sheep. Sheep don't strive. Sheep rely. Sheep don't strive. They rely. Sheep are completely reliant upon the shepherd. Sheep are utterly defenseless. You realize they have no fangs, they have no claws, and they have no horns. They are utterly defenseless without the shepherd. In fact, that's why David had to intervene when the lion came, when the wolves came. He had to defend the sheep, which is what God does for us as our shepherd. Sheep are dumb and prone to getting into trouble. Here's what John says. Isn't this so beautiful that Jesus actually likens us like he probably read 23rd Psalm and he made the connection. He said, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me." Here's what it says in John 10:11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Here's what I found in that word. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. That word want actually is a kind of a peculiar word. It's kaser. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it means to lack, need, be lacking, or decrease. So here's what he's saying. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not lack. How many think that's a pretty good promise? I shall not be in need. I shall not be lacking, or I will not decrease. I will advance. It's beautiful. Verse 2. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Isn't that beautiful imagery? He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. How many of you have ever been in a season where God made you lie down? Anybody relate to that? Hold, wait, stay. You ever been in a holding pattern from God? You ever had him try to slow you down? You know that that not one single time have I ever woke up and thought, you know what I feel like doing today? I feel like waiting. In fact, I'm going to go find me the longest line I can find. And I'm just going to wait all day. Has anybody ever gone to a doctor's room, office just to wait? No appointment, just sitting there, talking? No. We don't like to wait. As Americans, we want things now. We want things quick, right? But I can tell you that sometimes God will say, slow down and just lie for a bit. Just because nothing is happening doesn't mean nothing is happening. I remember being in a kind of a holding pattern for a long time. It was about 9-10 years. Had a desire to do a worship conference and have a worship school and produce a bunch of music. And for the longest time, the Lord was just like, not now. Not now. I remember being in a season where I was like, God, I don't understand why you put all this stuff inside of me. And you want me to, you put this dream in me, and why does it not seem to be happening? And all I kept getting was, lie down. You notice that he doesn't put the sheep next to swift waters. And he doesn't ask you to lie down in the valley of the shadow of death. You notice that when he says lie down, it's a place that's full of life, where you have the food that you need to eat. You have quiet, still waters so that you can get a drink. And what I found during that holding pattern is when I wrote a bunch of these books. I remember him telling me, I want you to start writing worship curriculum for a school that doesn't exist. I'm like, really? He said, just start writing. Just start developing teaching. Just start memorizing the Psalms. Fill yourself full during this lying down season. Can I encourage somebody here today? Yeah. If you're in a lying down season, make the most of it. Eat a bunch of grass. Don't smoke the grass. Just eat a bunch, okay? Fill up. Fill up. Fill yourself up with the good things of God. Because he has you there for a reason, and it's preparation. Then I remember last year, January, God said, it's time. Why don't you hold that conference that you've been dreaming about? Why don't you produce some of that music? Why don't you start that worship school? And my season of waiting was done, but I was ready for it. Are you ready? Or do we want to just hurry? Just help God out a little bit. Do it on our own. Isn't that what we tend to do? I'm going to make it happen. We're going to do it because I've got a strategy. And sometimes God's just saying, lie down. Lie down in green pastures. Drink some water. Rest. Prepare. Write. A lot of the songs that we've been recording, songs that I wrote in that 10-year season. Here's what it says in verse 3. He restoreth my soul. So let me ask you this question. What is the purpose of lying down? What is the purpose of that season of waiting? It goes right on and it says, after the season of waiting, he will restore my what? Soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I looked up that word restore. You know what it means? It's from a word shup. It means to turn back or to return. How many of you are hoping that God will return some things that were lost? To restore some things? Well, just know this, that season of waiting, that season of lying and resting and allowing God to love on you and show you some things, he'll begin to return what the enemy's stolen. He'll begin to return and restore some things in your life. And then all of a sudden he'll be like, okay, now it's time to move out. Now it's time to move out. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Now here's what I notice on this psalm. I notice that the first few verses are so serene. Did you notice that as well? So beautiful. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I have no needs. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to this beautiful brook where I can get drinks of water as I need. And then he restores some things. And then he says, okay, now it's time to move out. But here's the misnomer. We're still thinking that everything's serene. We're still thinking that we're moving out in the paths of righteousness and it's this beautiful scene. I want to change the narrative here. I want to tell you that the path of righteousness doesn't always mean it's a path of no danger. Do you know that last January, when God said, hold a conference, oh, and by the way, it's still COVID? And I was like, well, it's going to take a lot of money. I don't know if anybody's going to come. And I was like, he's like, no, this is the path of righteousness I have for you, so start planning it. Planning it by faith. You know what faith is spelled, right? R-I-S-K. And we took the risk. And we planned it. And about 2 weeks out, I only had 100 and some registered. And we needed like 500. And then all of a sudden, my good shepherd showed up. And people from states away flew in. And people from this church and people from this community. And we ended up with 725 people registered last year. And people were blessed. But I'm going to tell you, it wasn't easy. It's not going to be easy when everybody else is cheating the time clock at work for you to take a stand and say, I'm not doing it. And all your coworkers are like, come on, everybody does it. Or cheating on our taxes, or standing up for righteousness. It takes courage. It takes courage. It's not a path of no danger. The path of righteousness. You go into the voting station and you're at the ballot, you got your ballot in front of you, like, who in the world am I going to vote for? Like, I don't like any of these people. But you pray about it and you do the best you can and you vote with confidence. Anything that we do in life, anything that is righteous takes courage. Remember when God led the children of Israel out of Egypt? And there were several paths they could have taken to the promised land, but he happened to take them to the edge of the Red Sea. And he pins them up at the Red Sea. I mean, there's nowhere for them to go to the right or the left. Then all of a sudden, the army of Egypt is coming on their tails. And God did that. God led them in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Not for their comfortability, but for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You notice that it doesn't say, yea, though I run through the valley of the shadow of death, Walking takes one step at a time. And he's right there with us. You know what I've noticed about when God takes you in the paths of righteousness, even if it leads you into a valley of the shadow of death? If I was going to get to that keyboard over there, well, I could try it. I'm going to try it. Okay? I almost made it. Did you know that that's not how God works? I remember I had a Marine at my church in San Diego. He was in his, I think, 16th month. He said, Pastor Brian, I really need to talk to you. I need some counsel. I need some wisdom. Can we meet after service? I met with him, and his name was Jordan, and he was a French horn player. He was in the marching band. Yeah, I think it was the Marines. I actually had him play French horn on stage one time. And I kept trying to get him to play, but he wouldn't play it for me. But he was a really good French horn player. And he was like, Pastor Brian, in fact, I hear this all the time as a pastor. I just don't know what God wants me to do. You ever thought this? I'm willing to do it. I just have no idea what God wants me to do. If he would just show me, I would do it. So I told him, I said, Jordan, I said, you got what, 4 years in the Army, right? He said, yeah. He said, how long are you in? He said, I've been in 16 months. I said, well, here's what I'd do. I'd probably finish up your second year and then maybe focus on your third year. And then after that, after you finish the third year, why don't you focus on your fourth year? And then probably as you're walking it out, somewhere along the way, God will start to show you the next step. But we want to know it all now, don't we? We want to see way in the future and not realizing that God said, even if it's in the valley of the shadow of death, you need to walk it out. Just walk it out. Knowing that I'm with you. Can I ask you a question? Do you believe that God would lead you into a valley? Let me just give you a few examples. Jesus goes to John the Baptist. The heavens open up. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Which, by the way, he hadn't done anything to deserve that yet. He'd performed one miracle for his mom. He was completely without doing any miracles besides that one. The Lord said, I'm already well pleased with you. Isn't that encouraging? That we don't have to perform to be loved. That we literally just, by being his child, we're accepted. So the skies open up, the dove descends. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Now, Jesus, go into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. God did that. The Holy Spirit led Jesus into a wilderness. Paul was led by many into many dangerous and harmful situations. Remember when Agabus prophesied over him and took his belt and bound his hands and said, this is your future. And Paul said, I'm ready. I'm ready not just to go through suffering, but even to the point of death for my Lord. How about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Remember their journey? And there's literally too many examples to mention. You can read about them in Hebrews chapter 11. You notice that it doesn't say this. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death. That's not what it says. It says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Did you know that there are different kinds of death? It could mean actual death, a sickness of some sort that a doctor's report. But the imagery here is not just death, it's a shadow of death. You know, there are other kinds of death than just physical death. How about death of a marriage? How about death of a career? Or death of a business? Or death of a dream? Or death of a child? But here's the thing. No matter what kind of death or situation that we find ourselves, he promises, thou art with me. Michael Bublé just came to my mind. You are not alone. I am there with you. You are not alone in the valley of the shadow of death. But there's a difference between when God leads you into a valley and when you lead yourself. You ever found yourself in a situation and the shepherd's nowhere to be found? You're walking through the valley and you're like, I think I did this to myself. It's one thing when God leads you in a difficult path and in a difficult season. We just have to be careful to follow closely with our shepherd. Remember the transfiguration? Remember the Peter, James, and John, they went up the mountain with Jesus. And then, Moses, Elijah, bright clothes. Again, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. You remember what Peter's response was? Let's build a house. Let's build a shelter. One for Moses and one for Elijah and one for Jesus. And then some for me. There's a tendency sometimes in different seasons to camp instead of walk. He didn't say, yea, though I camp in the shadow of death, valley of shadow of death. He said, yea, though I walk. He also said that my rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Children of Israel, Pharaoh's coming. The army's coming. We're all going to die. And God says, what do you have in your hand? An interesting imagery, right? Just like the valley of the shadow of death. He stuck the rod out over the water, and the water's part in two. And there's two purposes for staffs, for a shepherd's staff. One end has the curly thing. That's used for direction. Grabbing the sheep by the neck or, directing them with the pulling them here and there. That's the direction part. But you know what the other part is for? You turn it around. Correction. Have you allowed the Good Shepherd to correct you? Really? Really to correct you? In fact, I read even in my study that sometimes a shepherd would even break the leg of a lamb with the rod because it was ending up somewhere that was probably going to get it killed. So they'd break the leg, and that way the sheep would stay very close to the shepherd after it was hurt. I wonder how many things that God has kept us from that we were upset about. That job, that relationship. Closed doors where the rod of correction, when the Lord is literally intervening in your life. The Good Shepherd. Is he a good shepherd? He's a good shepherd. He does nothing by chance. There's always a purpose. If it's uncomfortable at the time, it's because he's a good shepherd. And he wants what's best for us. I'll never forget, early on in my ministry, I was probably mid-20s or maybe, I think I'd only been a pastor at that point about a year or two. And I got the call. I worked for my dad for 10 years in California at his church before he passed. And Jim, Stephanie were close friends of ours. And I got the call. Their new little newborn baby, they went in and she wasn't moving, Victoria. And they went and shook her, and they found out that she had passed in her sleep. They were calling it crib death. And so my wife and I actually were some of the first to get there to their house. And, of course, they were distraught and weeping. And we stayed with them, I think, and we went and saw them every day for the first several weeks. And then they had the funeral. And then, if you know anything about the grieving process, you know, everybody's around at the funeral and everybody's supportive, and then kind of everybody goes away. And that's when it's actually most important to visit and to follow up and just walk them through those months and even the first year of mourning and grieving. And I'll never forget, it was about 2 months from her passing that all of a sudden, I mean, like every time we visited, I never tried to answer difficult questions. We literally just sat with them sometimes and just cried. And, but about 2 months in, all of a sudden, something shifted, something changed in both Jim and Stephanie. And they both just seemed to come alive and were happy and smiling. And so I said, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And Jim said, he said, "I got to tell you about something that happened." He said, "You know how sad we've been. A lot of times every day, at least at one point, I'll go into Victoria's room and just sit on the bed and stare at the crib and just cry." And he said, "I told the Lord the other day, I said, Lord, I just need to know that Victoria is in your arms right now." He said, "I just need to know that she's safe and she's loved." And he said, I cried some more. And he said, I got up and I went. And as I went to turn off the light, as soon as my finger touched the light switch, all of a sudden, on its own, the little mobile that was above her crib that she used to love to play with came on by itself and played the whole song one time. And he said, I just looked, my jaw fell open, and he said, I knew that Victoria was in Jesus' arms and she was safe. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff will comfort me. Isn't that a beautiful promise? Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. Just real quick, I'm almost done. But literally the oil that a shepherd would put on the sheep's face would keep the parasites out. Because the parasites would go up their nose and through their ears and stuff, and they'd go crazy, actually. The shepherd was so good, just even with meticulous details. Aren't you glad that God keeps us from going crazy? I mean, literally, he does. I mean, some of you thought you were in COVID. All right, you're like, I think I am going crazy. But isn't it beautiful that the Lord is meticulous even on the smallest details. My cup runneth over. I love the imagery of being in the presence of enemies and feasting. I don't have to be afraid. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Here's what it says in John 4. But the time is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Listen to this line. For the Father seeketh such as these to worship him. Have you ever tried hard to get in God's presence? Like I just need his presence right now. What if we worshiped in spirit and in truth, and he actually started chasing us? Surely goodness and mercy will follow you, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Several years ago, when I was at Christ for the Nations, I wrote a song called Shepherd of My Heart that we're going to play. And then I'm going to tell one final story and go into worship. But this song means a great deal to me. And my wife sang it. And so I just want you to watch the screen right now. Years ago, I was at a youth camp, and I was kind of doing the whole, give God everything. And all these kids were like, give him your car, give him your everything, give him your house. They didn't have any houses there. Your parents' house. I was like, whatever God is asking, give it to him. And it's clear as day. The Lord said, what about you? I said, what do you want, Lord? He said, I want your songs. I'm like, well, that's great, because nobody else seems to want them. I hadn't recorded a thing at that point. But I made an altar after that service, and I put my chicken scratch on napkins and things, all my songs. And I put them on the altar, and I said, Lord, these belong to you now. Take them and use them for your own purpose. I said, I'm not going to try to make anything happen. I'm just going to write them and record them when you say to. So we recorded this song, and I was sure that this was going to be a big hit. And it got out there, and some churches sang it and things, but I just said, okay, Lord, well, you asked me to write it. And I did. And I didn't understand, and obviously this psalm means a lot to me, and this song means a lot to me. But I didn't understand until about 10 years later, and I got a call from my brother-in-law, Louis, Kristen's brother. And he said, hey, I just wanted to tell you. He said, after work the other day, I felt like I should stop by Theo Albert's house, Uncle Albert. And just a history on Uncle Albert. Not a believer, lives an alternative lifestyle, party animal, just wants nothing to do with God. He said, I knocked on the door, and Albert opened, and he said, I've never seen Albert look so destitute. He looked awful. He looked like death warmed over. I said, what's wrong? He said, I've just been really sick. He said, so we went in, he laid on the couch, and I sat next to him, and I asked him, I said, Albert, I said, can I pray for you? And he said, no. He said, I don't believe in all that crap. He said, oh, okay. He said, so we just sat in silence for a little while. And he said, Albert, he said, can I play a song for you? And he said, yeah, sure. He said, I grabbed my phone, and the first song I could find was your song, Shepherd of My Heart. And he said, I put it on. And he said, about halfway through that song, I looked over at Theo Albert, and he was weeping. And when he got to the end of that song, he said, I need to give my heart to Jesus. He said, I prayed with him. But that's not the end of the story. He said, I went back after work the next day, and my aunt answered the door because Albert passed that night. Shepherd of my heart, shepherd, he's our shepherd. Could it be that this psalm actually saved your life? So God, I thank you. I thank you that you are not just a shepherd, not just a guide, but you are good. I thank you. Thank you that we have these promises. Thank you that literally this psalm describes in such a beautiful, eloquent way of who you are to us. So we look to you as our shepherd. We don't want the reins anymore. We want you to be on the throne. We want you to be in control.